Hello and welcome to GameSack. In this episode, we're talking about two systems that most of you have probably never had a chance to play, the NEC SuperGrafx and the Atari Jaguar.
That's right, Joe. And neither of these systems had a lot of games on them, so that's why we're going to combine them both into one episode.
That's right, and the NEC SuperGrafx, of course, played games on Hue cards like these, and of course it was never released outside of Japan.
That's right, and Joe, you're just an unbelievable fountain of information, so why don't we take a look at that SuperGrafx and you can tell us about it.
Okay. The SuperGrafx was released only in Japan in 1989 to combat the Mega Drive and the upcoming Nintendo Super Famicom. Basically, it has the same hardware as a standard PC Engine or TurboGrafx 16, but it has a second scrolling background layer like the Genesis, twice as many sprites on screen, and 4 times the RAM. The system itself has a rugged form factor. In case you're wondering, you'll need a 6mm hex wrench to open this baby up. Just kidding, that won't work. The port on the back allows you to add a CD-ROM drive. The AV port is, of course, on the side. The system could play regular PC Engine games as well, and there was a tiny switch on the back that you could toggle if you encountered any incompatibilities, though I never did. There were a total of 5 games released for the SuperGrafx, with 2 more bi-compatible games that also worked on the PC Engine. And that was it.
Alright, Joe, that was really some good information on the SuperGrafx. I assume we have a vast amount of games to look at for us.
Well, we have 4 out of the 5 games available.
I'm sorry, did you say 5 games?
Yeah.
I thought the Virtual Boy was the least supported system, but gosh, I guess not.
Yeah.
Well, 5 games plus 2 bi-compatible games, that really stinks.
Yeah, well it does, but let's look at what we have. Adynes is a horizontal shoot-'em-up. This game clearly takes place in the year 2020, only 8 years from now. It's based on a true story. Aliens attack the Earth and only a few ships make it off the planet alive. Now it's your job to stop the aliens and save the Earth and eventually the entire universe. So let's get try.
At first glance, this looks like an average PC Engine shooter. The power of the SuperGrafx is nowhere in sight. Well, at least not yet. Even the colors are rather ugly and the graphics undetailed. But hey, at least the music is really good.
Yeah, which of course means there's no sound test to be found.
You collect weapons and power them up like most other shooters, and can also grab a little option-like thing which can help you out by shooting other enemies around the screen or can be locked to your side to shoot in the same direction you are. If you hold down the fire button, you can create a little shield in front of your ship to help you out.
This game is pretty tough, but it's not hard, it's challenging. That means it makes me want to keep trying to get past the parts where I die. I like that in a game. The SuperGrafx powers show up a little more obviously in the later stages with overlapping parallax and whatnot. And again, the music is pretty good as well. However, when all is said and done, I think this could be a regular PC Engine game without much of a loss in graphic detail.
And of course a smaller price tag.
"1941 Counterattack" is an overhead shoot-'em-up by Capcom. This game is way more advanced than a primitive 1942 or even 1943, which I guess were the sequels since they're numbered higher. I don't really follow the series, so I don't know which game goes where. This game is much more enjoyable than those in my opinion. It's very fast-paced and frenetic. I was really surprised with this game as the other 1940 games never really did much for me.
The gameplay doesn't really need much explanation. Perhaps the SuperGrafx is using its power to put so much crap on screen at once. Every once in a while you'll see an additional layer of scrolling as well. The graphics are all very well drawn and colorful, and the music is immensely enjoyable as well. Much better than the whistles and drum soundtrack from 1942.
Yeah, I love the way the PC Engine sounds, and the music in this game really uses that sound to good effect. And yes, there is a sound test. The most annoying thing though is the alarm that sounds when you're low on life. Is that really necessary? I think the game would be better without it. Is this game better than 1943, which is on the regular non-Super PC Engine? Well, I don't know because I haven't played it. So you guys tell us which is better, but I do know that this game is pretty awesome. Madao Grand Zord is a platformer based on a Japanese TV cartoon series. We'll just call it Grand Zord.
Wow, Joe, this looks kind of familiar. Is this the sequel to that one game that came with the TurboGrafx? You know, Keith Courage in the Alpha Zones? I mean, just look at the two.
Actually, no. Well, maybe. I don't know. They're originally based on different anime series, I think. But here in Grand Zord, you can change characters at any time. Each has their own method of attack as well as their own special ability. The red guy swings a sword just like Keith Courage. His special attack is sort of an earthquake type thing. The green guy shoots projectiles and his special is the ability to float. I like using this guy a lot. Finally, the blue guy has kind of a javelin style attack and his special move is to surround himself with an energy shield which also hurts enemies. I really like this game, but it's pretty damn hard. It's one hit and you're dead if you don't have the shield. And since you're so big, it's kind of tough to avoid getting touched by some of the bosses. Patience is required for this game, but it hasn't really frustrated me much yet. I'm just having too much fun with it.
You can tell this is a SuperGrafx game because it's scrolling like a Genesis game.
Yeah, the graphics are pretty good overall, I think. The music's not bad either. Definitely a recommended pickup if you have a SuperGrafx. Ghouls 'n Ghosts is probably the most popular game on the SuperGrafx. Granted, the true name is Daimakai Mura or something like that, but we'll just call it Ghouls 'n Ghosts. This is a fairly faithful translation from the arcade and features 8 mega power. It's more faithful in many areas than the Genesis version, which only had 5 mega power. First of all, Ghouls 'n Ghosts is an excellent game and it's an absolute must-have if you have a SuperGrafx.
Even if you don't have a SuperGrafx, it's a must-have for any system where it's available.
Yeah, definitely, but it is harder than the Genesis version for a few reasons. Firstly, the controls don't allow diagonals. You come to a dead stop if you accidentally press up left or up right, but that's faithful to the arcade. For this reason, I feel the Genesis version controls much better and more fluidly. Secondly, if you die while fighting a boss, you get sent back to the middle of the stage, whereas you started from the boss in the Genesis version. Again, this is more faithful to the arcade. And lastly, your continues are very limited. This aspect really sucks because I'd rather commit suicide rather than pick up a crappy weapon.
I totally agree. I wonder if the developers made certain weapons really crappy just to frustrate the players. I mean, who in their right mind really likes this huge axe?
So far, I've made it up to the end of stage 4 on the second loop, as you need to beat the game twice in order to truly beat it. Graphically, the game is pretty good and also a little chintzy in some areas, but it's par for the course with NEC Avenue, who did the port.
It does have some more background animation that tries to look like the arcade. It does well enough to get a thumbs up.
Oh, definitely. The music is pretty good as well. So does this version outshine the Genesis version? Check them both out and judge for yourself.
Well, Joe, that was very good, but what game did we miss?
Well, we missed Battle Ace, Dave. It's a game that pretty much everyone who's played it says kind of sucks, but I've never played it, so I'll have to take their word for it, I guess.
Was it on the Jaguar also?
No. And we also missed the 2 bi-compatible games, Darius Plus and Darius Alpha, when played on the SuperGrafx, they have slightly better graphics, maybe a few extra layers of scrolling or whatnot. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. That's very interesting.
Yeah,
so.
I would too, but they're very expensive.
Well, send us one of those, please, everybody, so we can try them out. Anyways, let's move on to the Jaguar. And I've just got to say, Joe, that I've always felt that Atari made the highest quality systems and the best games out there.
Really?
No, not really. Are you kidding?
Oh, poor Atari.
Yeah, they are very poor. So, well, let's take a look at the Jaguar.
The Atari Jaguar was released in late 1993, hot on the heels of the new 3DO and well before Sega's 32X add-on. Atari went to great lengths to advertise the Jaguar as a 64-bit system. Was it? Well, kind of, but not really. Some aspects were 64-bit like the memory bus, but Atari justified it all by asking people to do the math. In all honesty, bitness doesn't matter. The system itself felt fairly solid, though the AV port on the back of the system was simply an exposed circuit board. This definitely added an element of cheapness. The system used cartridges which could be as large as 48 mega power. Later, a CD-ROM drive was released which looked odd. Only 13 games would be released for it though. The controller was also odd, offering a keypad with overlays for additional button controls. There was an 8-button controller released as well. Overall, the Jaguar had 71 games released for it, counting CDs, and around 130 games that were planned but never came out. The system was a commercial and critical failure and was discontinued in 1996.
Joe, I am so pumped to play some Jaguar games.
Oh, me too, me too! Let's rock and roll! Cybermorph was the game that came included with the Jaguar system.
Imagine all the disappointed kids when they knew that this game was a packing game. I would have rather had nothing.
Basically, the game consists of a 3D world where you fly around trying to find little yellow pods for whatever reason and then get to the exit. If the enemies get in your way, then it's your job to shoot them down. You've got to do this on many different planets before the entire universe is safe. One button makes you go forward, another backwards, and they counter each other out as well, acting as brakes. The middle button shoots. The control is alright, but I find myself wondering where I learned to fly.
Where did you learn to fly?
I don't know.
Where did you learn to fly?
I don't know.
Where did you learn to fly?
I don't know! The graphics are pretty bland and could easily be surpassed by the 32X. I don't think the game is as bad as Dave thinks it is, and I did experience a little bit of enjoyment with it.
You're such a liar. I can't imagine anybody really enjoying this game or even having a nostalgic moment of enjoyment. I'm sorry guys, but this game is just bad.
Good work.
Next up is Wolfenstein 3D. This was one of the first-person shooters ever, or at least the first massively popular one. The Jaguar version turned out pretty good. It's easy to get into despite my disdain for the genre. It does seem to run a little bit too fast, but that's okay I suppose. The graphics are, well, Wolfenstein, and they haven't really been improved from what I can tell. They are full screen, however. Overall, an enjoyable effort.
I'm pretty darn sure this is my favorite game on the Jaguar. I found it very enjoyable. The control scheme was really easy to learn and worked really well. The graphics were blocky, but everything was discernible. The pictures of Hitler were spot on. A total blockhead, just like the real guy.
Even Raiden came to the Jaguar. We covered this game briefly back in episode 32, which was called Some Notable Vertical Shooters, but we'll take another quick look at it here. It's a fairly decent version of the game. It plays okay, but there seems to be more enemies on the screen than other versions. The graphics are decent enough, and the music has that Amiga mod sound with the hard panned instruments with none of them being in the center. There's a new musical tune that shows up in stage 3, I don't know if there are any more or not. Firing the weapon seems to take a lot of effort with the stiff buttons on the Jaguar pad.
This is where I found out how uncomfortable the Jaguar controller was. After playing Raiden on other systems, I felt this controller didn't really help as my thumb started to ache after a short time of button pushing.
Here's Flashback, the quest for identity. I never cared much for this game, though I do admire its ambition. This version doesn't seem to make any improvements over the 16-bit versions other than the sound quality.
I also am not a huge fan of Flashback. I do like the style of gameplay, but I would rather play games like Heart of Darkness, Blackthorn, or any of the Oddworld games. At least this made it to the Jaguar, unlike the other ones.
Can you tell much of a difference between the Jaguar and this Genesis version? Does this mean the Genesis is every bit as powerful as the Jaguar? You decide. Tempest 2000 is one of the holy grails of the Jaguar.
I don't understand this.
Basically, you're a wireframe and your goal is to blow up other wireframes on a wireframe board. I've never been a huge fan of the original Tempest, and to be honest, I can only play this version for about 5 or 10 minutes before I become disinterested. I think the lack of a rotary controller hurts the gameplay, to be honest, but I was surprised that they do make them. I'm not sure if they're official or not.
It was kind of cumbersome moving your ship or whatever it is around the corners. I always got stuck and therefore ended up dying.
Yeah, what they did with this game is pretty good. It's just not up my alley. I always have a hard time when the enemy gets outside the border of the playfield. I'm not sure how to kill it, and I usually get caught. I have survived that situation before, though. I just have no idea how I did it. The music is pretty good, or at least some of it is.
Yeah, I like the driving beats.
I think this should have been the packing game, honestly. Checkered Flag is a Formula 1 style racing game. The first time you see it, images of Sega's Virtua Racing instantly spring to mind.
Yeah, and a little bit of Stunt Race FX also.
Then you realize that this game is a turd in comparison. The control is very twitchy. The courses themselves are not very interesting and many of them look the same. The flat polygons are ancient by today's standards and Virtua Racing on the 32X blows it away. Even the regular old Genesis version of Virtua Racing with the SVP chip plays better. But if there was no Virtua Racing to compare this to, would this game be any good?
Nope. The game stands on its own merit. It's only as good as the effort the developers put into the game.
This game isn't unplayable, it's just a rather poor imitation of better games. And speaking of poor imitation, here's Fight for Life. Yep, this was their attempt at a Virtua Fighter clone. I remember Sam Tramiel, who was in charge of Atari at the time, saying that the Jaguar is at least as powerful as the Saturn. Really? Because this game really doesn't look any better than the 32X version of Virtua Fighter. And it certainly plays much worse.
And what's with the life bars popping in and out? That's a huge distraction for me. Also, the synthesized guitar is very unpleasant to my ears.
It's very slow and the control is just awful. Don't bother yourself with this one.
Okay, I won't.
Iron Soldier was one of the higher profile polygon games for the system, I think.
Well, these title screen graphics look really good.
Yeah, basically it's a mech game where you wander around a large area destroying enemies.
Maybe I spoke too soon. This looks really bad. I mean, it may have been okay back in the day, but it really isn't much better looking than Cybermorph.
Yeah, it kinda reminds me of a poor man's Metalhead. That's a similar mech game on the 32X.
Even that looks better.
Anyway, the gameplay here in Iron Soldier is rather slow. You need to press and hold the A button while pressing the directional pad to adjust your walking speed, and you can't aim and fire at the same time. There are more functions, but you gotta look at the overlay to figure them out, and who has time to read all this? There seems to be tons of enemies to destroy in each level. It's not the worst game ever by any means, but it just takes some getting used to.
At least the music is good. I've got to admit that.
Yeah, it is pretty good. Overall, it's a bland looking, nice sounding game that offers some depth if you're willing to take the time to get into it. Here we have Kasumi Ninja. Yep, Atari wanted a Mortal Kombat clone as well, but in this game you choose your character and opponent in a weird 3D room for some reason. Yes, they even made choosing your character a chore. It's very slow and clunky.
At least they try to be different, and I will give them credit for that, but it's very confusing.
Once you get into the actual game, you've got digitized characters, which were all the rage back in the day. And let's not forget the copious amounts of blood that's everywhere. The characters border on the ridiculous, with this game being best known for the guy who shoots fireballs from his kilt.
Yeah, that was a huge fail. Why is everyone supposed to like crap like that? It really degrades the game.
The control is alright, but it's still a bad Mortal Kombat clone. I do like the line-scrolling floor, however. At least they got that right. The music is nothing special at all.
Ganja, win. Show no mercy. Jackie wins.
This is Ultra Vortec.
Atari decided they want to corner the poor Mortal Kombat clone market, so we also got this fine gem.
It's even worse than Kasumi Ninja. Much worse, actually. Again, we have the digitized characters who bleed all over the place, but this time we sacrifice pretty much any semblance of actual gameplay. It's a very difficult game to control and actually win. The background graphics aren't bad, and the use of color is actually pretty good in spots, but they still look kinda cheesy in my opinion.
The backgrounds were by far the best part of this game. I liked all the different types of skulls.
The music is dreadful synth guitar, which actually makes playing this game even less pleasant. Club Drive is a rather sad excuse for a driving game. You start out driving what appears to be a toy car around collecting little globules of energy or something like that. In this sense, it reminds me of Toy Commander on the Dreamcast, only far less interesting.
Were they really serious with a game like this? I know times have changed since then, but I can't imagine people being too happy with these undetailed and glitchy visuals even when it was new.
Yeah, no kidding, right? You can drive real cars later, but the gameplay remains the same from what I can tell. There is music in this game, surprisingly, but it's certainly nothing noteworthy. I just got bored with this one really fast.
Yeah, Joe, Club Drive is definitely a club I don't want to belong to.
Alien vs. Predator is one of the other holy grails for the Jaguar. In this game, you can choose to play as an alien, a predator, or a colonial marine. Playing as a predator, you're wandering around, killing humans and stuff. It's actually very hard to kill humans here, even when they're right in front of you. Playing as an alien, you have 3 attacks, which makes killing humans much easier, but it's still pretty tough. And the humans are all up in your ass in this game, and it's really easy to die. The best way to play is as the Colonial Marine. You've got some Duke Nukem style Tood.
What on earth got a hold of this guy?
Okay, not quite Duke Nukem, but Tood was required from pretty much all games back then. You've also got a shotgun, which is really easy to use. You wander around shooting aliens and grabbing ammo, food, and keys. Not much seems to really happen, and it does get kind of boring after a bit. The graphics are pretty good for the time, but the frame rate can be kind of choppy. Still, it at least showed that the Jaguar had some semblance of graphical power, which almost all of the other games failed to do. The music in this game is amazing! Oh wait, there's no music.
After playing all the scenarios briefly, I'm not really impressed. A lot of boring corridor wandering and ultra blocky backgrounds isn't really entertaining. The controls are okay, but not near as good as Wolfenstein. The button overlays are a chore. It's almost impossible to strafe and shoot at your enemies while playing this game.
I guess if you have a 6-button controller, just strafing is a little easier, but we didn't have one of those when we played this.
It's hard to believe that this is one of the most coveted, enjoyable games on the system. It really says a lot about the system if this game is the cream of the crop. Wow, Joe, with games like that, it's really no wonder Atari isn't around anymore.
Yeah.
I'm gotta say, I feel I probably pissed off a lot of Atari fans, and I'm sorry about that, I truly am, but I personally just don't see the attraction to the games or the system.
So you're saying you like the SuperGrafx more than the Jaguar then?
Oh yes, I do. Even though the SuperGrafx had a tiny library, I did enjoy it more than the games I played on the Jaguar, but even more importantly, I think the Virtual Boy is better than the SuperGrafx.
You're an idiot. Anyway, I definitely like the SuperGrafx more than the Jaguar as well. In fact, I think I even enjoyed the 32X's library more than I enjoyed the Jaguar.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Well, you know what? The Virtual Boy is better than the 32X.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is. It's made by Nintendo.
Anyway, we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.